One of my favorite sayings in the English lexicon is, "Time will tell." I find the idiom elegant in its simplicity and honesty. It makes no claim to know what has not yet happened. It does not pretend that certainty is available when it is not. It simply acknowledges that eventually reality reveals itself. Or, as Seneca is often credited with saying, time discovers truth. It is difficult to predict the future. We can study historical trends, examine patterns over time, build models, and make increasingly sophisticated forecasts. But eventually, it is time that shows us how the future actually unfolds. Time is an interesting concept when you stop to reflect on it. Our days are organized around it. What time we wake up, what time we go to work, what time we meet with a colleague, what time we need to be in front of a customer, what time we eat, what time we pick up our kids. For many of us, time quite literally tells us what to do. We are so surrounded by it that we rarely stop to think about how much of our lives depend on a shared understanding of it. We are like fish in water, so immersed in the system that we sometimes forget we are even swimming in it. It has only been around 150 years since standard time began reshaping daily life. Before the growth of railway transportation, most cities operated according to their own local time, generally determined by the position of the sun. It could be noon in one city and several minutes earlier or later in a neighboring city only a few miles away. That worked reasonably well when most people did not travel very far or very fast. Our railway systems changed that. As trains began moving people and goods over greater distances, local time created a practical problem. Conductors needed a reliable way to know when trains would arrive at each station, and more importantly, how to prevent the trains from colliding as they moved through an expanding network. The journey had become faster, so space between became more condensed, and therefore the clocks had to become more standardized. For time to tell everyone when the next train would arrive, everyone needed to be looking at the same clock. Recently, I found myself wondering whether we are still looking at the same clock. But before we go any further, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and share thoughts on how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change. If you find any value in this video, like it, share your comments below, and subscribe. This week, I listened to an episode of The Diary of a CEO featuring Daniel Kokotajlo, a former OpenAI researcher and forecaster. His work has focused on predicting how quickly artificial intelligence may develop and what could happen if progress continues along its current trajectory. Kokotajlo left OpenAI in 2024 after becoming increasingly concerned about the direction of the company and the wider AI industry. He also declined to sign an agreement that could have restricted his ability to criticize the organization, a decision that initially placed $2 million of his OpenAI equity at risk. It is difficult not to pay attention when someone is willing to risk that much to speak openly. During the interview, Kokotajlo described a future in which AI development accelerates much faster than most of society expects. His central argument is that companies such as OpenAI and Anthropic are not merely trying to build systems that can help humans work more efficiently. He suggests they are increasingly focused on creating systems capable of automating more of the AI research process itself. We are already beginning to see AI become highly capable at writing and editing code. The next step, according to Kokotajlo, is to automate more of the work involved in developing the next generation of AI models, designing experiments, analyzing results, generating new research ideas, and improving the systems themselves. If that happens, progress may no longer move at a pace set entirely by human researchers. The systems would begin assisting in the development of better systems, which would then help create even more capable systems. The cycle would begin to compound. His forecasts suggest that this process could begin producing radical changes as early as next year, with the world looking significantly different only in a couple years. It is a difficult timeline to comprehend. The year 2029 does not feel like science fiction. It feels close enough that there are already calendar holds, quietly waiting between here and there. What Coco Tajlo describes sounds almost impossible. Artificial intelligence rapidly improving itself, large portions of knowledge work being automated, governments struggling to respond, entire economic and political systems being reorganized around a technology that most people still experience primarily through a chatbot. Is he right? I do not know. But I do know time will tell. I am not sure that determining whether his exact forecast is right is the most important question for us right now. What caught my attention was not only the future he described, but the difference between the clock he appears to be looking at and the one most of us are operating from. Many people still seem to be viewing artificial intelligence as a technology that will slowly work its way into existing systems. We imagine new tools arriving, organizations gradually adopting them, jobs slowly evolving, and society gradually adjusting over time. Kokotajlo seems to be looking at a very different clock. On his clock, the journey is accelerating so quickly that the stations themselves may be redesigned before most of us even realize the train has already left. Who is right? Again, time will tell. But something happened in my own life this week that made his argument feel a little less abstract. I was part of a group text exchange where someone shared a photograph of himself standing on a golf course green. He was posing beside the flag, holding up his golf ball and celebrating a hole-in-one. Within minutes, another person in the group used Gemini to turn the photograph into a video. In the video, the golfer took off his shirt, climbed onto the flagstick as though he were riding a horse, and eventually leapt into the pond behind the green in celebration. It looked remarkably real. The movement, the setting, down to the detail on the flagstick, and the appearance of the person were convincing enough that I had to watch it twice. The entire thing had been created in minutes. That level of quality, produced that quickly by an ordinary person sitting just with their phone, did not exist in the same way a year ago. But it does now. And my guess is it will only get better. That does not prove Kokotajlo's forecast is correct. It does not prove that superintelligence is arriving in 2027 or that the world will be unrecognizable by 2029. But it does make it harder to dismiss the speed of the underlying change we are experiencing. The question I keep returning to is what it will feel like to live through a period in which more and more people begin to realize that the clocks may be moving faster than they thought. My assumption is that it will create a lot of fear. I am not sharing the interview to intensify that fear either. Some of what Kokotajlo describes is genuinely unsettling. He even admits that not every prediction he shares will come true, but that level of uncertainty itself places pressure on our nervous systems. The human brain is constantly trying to anticipate what happens next. Our brains are exceptionally good at building models of the world by searching for patterns and using past experience to prepare us for the future. That predictive capacity is one of the reasons we have survived for as long as we have as a species. But prediction depends on some degree of continuity. We expect tomorrow to look enough like today that the mental models we have already built will remain useful. We assume the career paths, organizational structures, institutions, and social norms that have shaped our lives will continue to provide some indication of what comes next. When those assumptions become less reliable, uncertainty expands. And as uncertainty expands, the brain strives to find indicators of certainty. This ultimately forces our nervous systems to more urgently search for safety. That is one reason emotionally charged narratives become so powerful during periods of transformation. When people feel uncertain, a confident explanation from a source we believe to be credible can feel stabilizing, even when the explanation itself is frightening. Someone who says, "I do not know what will happen," may be more honest, but someone who you trust that says, "This is exactly what will happen," gives the brain something solid to hold. We may reject their conclusion, but certainty is still oddly comforting. It gives a shape to the unknown. I wonder if this is part of what is happening in the wider conversation about artificial intelligence. There are increasingly two broad stories available to us. One says AI will destroy jobs, concentrate power, undermine democracy, and perhaps create risks that humanity cannot control. The other says AI will usher in extraordinary abundance, cure diseases, expand human capability, and create levels of prosperity we can barely imagine. Both stories may contain truth, but both also may be incomplete. Artificial intelligence is a paradox. It carries the potential for enormous disruption and enormous possibility at the same time. It may destabilize systems we have depended on, while also helping us solve problems those systems have never been capable of solving. Even Coco Tajlo's more hopeful AI 2040 Plan A scenario reflects this paradox. His proposed path in this scenario includes significant government regulation, greater transparency, and a deliberate slowing down of advanced AI development. Yet, even under that more controlled scenario, his forecast still depicts a world that dramatically transforms over the next 10 years. Work changes so significantly that it might not even exist. Economic structures are completely upended. All the while, scientific discovery accelerates, producing inventions and cures that are currently hard to imagine. In this scenario, AI becomes responsible for a growing share of cognitive and manual labor. Society is forced to rethink what income, power, and purpose are, and just as importantly, how they are distributed. In other words, even the slower and more controlled path represents a significant departure from what we have historically considered normal. It is not a return to the world we know. It is simply a more deliberate journey into a vastly different future. That may be the part of this conversation that matters most. Transformation appears to be coming, whether we approach it with fear or curiosity. The question is not whether we can preserve the world exactly as it is. The question is whether we can remain clear enough to participate thoughtfully in what it is becoming. Over the last several years, I have become increasingly convinced that awareness is as physiological as it is cognitive. By that, I mean the body is often registering uncertainty, threat, and change before the conscious mind has found language for what it is experiencing. We often think we can reason our way through uncertainty by gathering more information. Sometimes we can. But there is a point at which additional information no longer creates clarity. It simply gives the brain more material to interpret as a threat. The ability to navigate what is coming may depend less on our ability to rationally predict the future and more on recognizing the nervous system state from which we are trying to predict it. When we operate from fear, our attention narrows. We scan for danger. We become more rigid in our thinking and more attached to familiar explanations. We naturally search for certainty, choose sides, and become increasingly resistant to information that complicates the story we have accepted to be true. That response is not a character flaw. It is the result of a natural evolution of our biology attempting to protect us. But it can make us less capable of seeing what is actually happening. A dysregulated nervous system has less capacity to hold paradox. It wants AI to be good or bad. It wants the future to be safe or dangerous. It wants the forecast to be right or wrong. In other words, it deeply craves certainty. A more regulated system has a greater capacity to remain in the tension of uncertainty. It can acknowledge that this emerging technology may create real danger without surrendering to panic. It can recognize the extraordinary opportunity without becoming naive to what is happening. It can prepare for disruption while maintaining an openness to possibility. That, to me, is where the idea of expanded intelligence becomes important. Expanded intelligence is not just the combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. It is also not simply using more advanced tools to produce more work in less time. It is the expansion of our capacity to perceive, interpret, and intentionally respond. On the trajectory we are on, it seems artificial intelligence will give us access to more information, more analysis, and more capabilities than any previous generation has possessed. But that alone does not make us wiser. In fact, if our nervous systems are overwhelmed, more intelligence may simply give us more reasons to stay afraid. We may become faster without becoming clearer. We may generate more possibilities while becoming less capable of actually choosing among them. What I am saying is we may gain the ability to build extraordinarily powerful solutions while remaining governed by the same old threat responses. Expanded intelligence is something more and different. It encourages us to expand our awareness alongside our technology, to become more consciously aware of the narratives shaping us, the fear moving through us, and the assumptions we filter our experience through. Maybe it is about noticing which clock we are looking at and recognizing who said it. Over a year ago, when I began writing this newsletter, I was operating from a hypothesis that massive job displacement was coming faster than most people realized. Part of my motivation for writing this every week was to help people wake up to that possibility and begin preparing. My thinking about that has shifted a bit. I still think substantial job disruption is likely. It may already be happening in parts of the economy, even if it has not yet appeared as mass unemployment. But I increasingly wonder whether waiting for widespread job displacement is actually looking for the wrong signal. If artificial intelligence reaches the point where it replaces the majority of knowledge workers, the questions facing society will be much larger than employment. My emerging hypothesis for this newsletter is becoming clearer. It is not simply to help people anticipate disruption. It is to explore the human capacities we will need in order to participate in this transformation without becoming overwhelmed by it. It is helping people recognize the gap between individuals and organizations that learn how to work with expanded intelligence and those that remain trapped in resistance, fear, or denial. I am not suggesting we surrender our judgment to the technology or race toward adoption without considering the consequences. Instead, there is this emerging capability to develop or expand our capacity to engage with uncertainty as the future emerges. The organizations that do this well will not simply have better AI tools or faster adoption. They will have leaders who can help people remain oriented while the environment continually and increasingly changes around them. They will create space for honest questions without allowing fear to dominate every conversation. They will have the courage to experiment, learn, and adjust without pretending to know exactly where the journey ends. Most importantly, they will understand that the state of the people using the technology will shape what the technology ultimately becomes inside the organization. Perhaps Kokotajlo is right, and the clock is moving much faster than most of us understand. Or maybe he is wrong, and the limitations of the technology will reveal themselves over time. Again, time will tell. But while time is discovering the truth about artificial intelligence, it may also be revealing something important about us. What helps us remain present when the future becomes difficult to predict? What allows us to acknowledge fear without allowing it to make our decisions? What helps us look at the clock without becoming controlled by it? I do not know exactly what the world will look like in 2029. None of us do. But I am increasingly convinced that the people and organizations best prepared for it will not be the ones who predicted every development correctly. They will be the ones who learned how to remain clear, curious, and regulated while the future is still unfolding. If you want to explore how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change, my new book, The Missing Link, offers a new lens. It shows why most change efforts stall and how human capacity, not just strategy, determines success. Once you see it, you'll lead change very differently. You can access it for free right now. Link is below the video.